"You'll never amount to anything," my father said as I stepped into the family room, the sunlight from the bay window casting long shadows across the polished hardwood floor. I paused, letting the words settle around me like dust, feeling a strange calm amid the sting. The room smelled faintly of cinnamon from the morning coffee, the same scent that had always reminded me of quiet mornings spent with my mother before the chaos of life took over. I glanced at the framed photos lining the mantel, images of holidays, birthdays, and summers at Lake Michigan, all moments where I had been present yet invisible in their eyes. My mother shifted in her seat, her pearls clicking softly against the wooden armrest of her chair, and I could see the faint twitch at the corner of her mouth, a half-smile meant to mock, to belittle without uttering another word. I held my posture, letting my hands rest lightly on the back of the armchair, noticing every detail, the crease in my father's brow, the way his watch caught the sunlight, the subtle tension in his shoulders. They had spent decades underestimating me, dismissing my accomplishments, and I had endured with quiet patience, never raising my voice, never showing that the tiny victories I achieved outside this room mattered. Today was different. I had prepared carefully for this moment, gathering documents, letters, and proof of everything I had worked for independently, evidence that their words could not touch. I set the envelope gently on the coffee table, the soft rustle of paper a quiet announcement, a whisper of what was to come. The check inside gleamed faintly under the afternoon light, its golden embossing a stark contrast to the muted tones of the room. I did not speak. I did not need to. Every glance, every flicker of recognition in their eyes conveyed more than words ever could. The air was still, the ticking of the clock on the wall filling the silence between us, marking the seconds as if counting down to their realization. I traced the edge of the envelope with my fingertip, each movement deliberate, controlled, a rhythm that mirrored the steady pulse of my determination. Their laughter had vanished, replaced by a heavy tension, a quiet understanding that the dynamics they had relied on for so long were shifting. I could see it in my father's eyes, the flash of surprise, the tightening of his jaw, the subtle falter in his confident posture. My mother's hand hovered over her lap, as though she had forgotten the proper way to hold herself in my presence. I smiled softly, a calm that masked the satisfaction simmering just beneath the surface. This was not revenge in the traditional sense. It was the revelation of what they had consistently refused to see. A capable, determined woman who had quietly built her own path and would now demonstrate the weight of her achievements without raising her voice, without needing to justify her existence. And as I stepped back, my heels clicking against the polished floor, I left the room filled with the soft light of afternoon, the envelope resting as a silent testament to the truth I had carried within me all these years, leaving them to grapple with their own misconceptions, the realization slowly settling that underestimating me had been their greatest mistake. The morning sunlight filtered through the sheer curtains, casting a soft glow over the living room where I had spent countless hours tending to family gatherings, arranging flowers, and preparing meals that no one seemed to notice. The coffee table was still neatly arranged from yesterday, with magazines and a cup of herbal tea I had left untouched while observing the subtle shifts in my parents' expressions. Their movements were precise, controlled, but I could sense the underlying tension, the recognition of something they had not anticipated. I walked slowly to the bookshelf, running my fingers along the spines of worn books, each title reminding me of the quiet hours I had spent studying, learning, and building skills that no one had acknowledged. I could hear the soft ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner, marking time in a room that suddenly felt smaller, more intimate, as if the walls themselves were leaning in to witness the transformation. My mind replayed conversations from previous family dinners, moments when I had been dismissed, laughed at, or spoken over, and yet I had smiled politely, nodding, keeping the peace. I sipped my tea slowly, feeling the warmth spread through my hands, grounding me, reminding me of the calm I had cultivated over years of patience. Outside, the wind moved the branches of the maple tree, leaves rustling, a gentle rhythm that matched my own steady heartbeat. I glanced at the framed photographs on the wall, noticing the little details I had overlooked before, the way my father's eyes squinted slightly in one, my mother's hand positioned delicately in another. Each image told a story of underestimation, of unspoken judgment. And yet here I was, fully aware, fully present, absorbing every nuance. I took a deep breath, letting it fill my lungs, the scent of polished wood and faint vanilla reminding me of the care I had poured into this house, into my own life. Slowly, I moved to the window, looking out at the street below, imagining the years of unseen effort, the quiet victories that had accumulated while others doubted my intelligence, my judgment, my capabilities. I felt a quiet satisfaction, not triumph, not vindication, but a steady understanding of my own worth, independent of their opinions. I returned to the armchair, sitting with poise, hands folded in my lap, eyes scanning the room, noting how the afternoon light shifted, how shadows fell differently now, how every subtle movement of my parents carried an unfamiliar uncertainty. There was a new gravity in the space, a silent acknowledgment of the presence I had always been, the force of intellect and experience that they had ignored for so long. I allowed myself a small smile, not of malice, but of composure, a calm readiness for the revelations that were yet to unfold, knowing that the story of this house, of my life, and of the respect I deserved was just beginning to reveal itself, and that the balance of perception was quietly, irrevocably shifting. I moved quietly through the hallway, each step deliberate, feeling the weight of observation pressing gently on me as I considered the subtle expressions on my parents' faces. The afternoon light spilled across the polished oak floor, highlighting the dust motes that danced lazily in the air, evidence of quiet mornings spent maintaining this home with care and attention that had gone unnoticed. I paused by the side table, fingers brushing the edge of a framed photo of my graduation, a silent reminder of achievements that had been dismissed with a smile or a shrug. My father adjusted his tie, a habitual gesture, while my mother reached for a cup of tea, her hand trembling slightly, betraying the tension beneath her composed exterior. I felt a quiet satisfaction, a steady awareness of the power I held simply by being present, by observing, by knowing. Each whispered comment, each sideways glance they exchanged seemed to hang in the air, the space between us charged with the unspoken recognition of the intelligence and persistence they had long underestimated. I walked to the window and rested my hands against the cool glass, watching the shadows lengthen across the lawn, each one a marker of time, of patience, of moments they had failed to see. The room, once a stage for condescension, now felt suspended, poised on the edge of revelation, the mundane details of furniture and photographs suddenly carrying weight. I took a slow breath, the scent of polished wood and faint lavender filling my senses, grounding me in the clarity of my purpose. My eyes traveled over the room again, noting the precise lines of the carpet, the glint of light on the silver picture frames, and I understood fully that their attempts to diminish me had only prepared the way for this quiet unveiling of truth. I did not need to speak. The presence of my awareness, the calm of my posture, and the subtle authority in my gaze were enough. Outside, the wind rustled the maple tree, leaves brushing softly against one another, a gentle reminder that life moved in cycles, and that patience often precedes recognition. I allowed myself a faint smile, not for triumph, but for the knowledge that the efforts, intelligence, and resilience that had always been mine were finally being perceived, even if unspoken. My mind wandered briefly to the countless evenings I had spent reading, learning, preparing, all without acknowledgment, and yet here it culminated in a quiet shift, a subtle but undeniable change in the energy of the room. I settled into the armchair, hands folded, body poised, eyes scanning each detail, as if cataloging a transformation. Every movement of my parents, every tiny adjustment of a posture, every flutter of an eyelid now spoke louder than words ever could. The air was thick with anticipation, a delicate tension balanced between respect, surprise, and realization. I breathed slowly, letting the moment stretch, savoring the clarity that comes from knowing that my presence, my intelligence, and my quiet determination had finally shifted the room, preparing the stage for what would come next, leaving them to navigate the unfolding acknowledgment of what had long been rightfully mine. I walked slowly to the corner of the room, my fingers brushing the edge of the side table, feeling the subtle textures of the polished wood under my touch. The soft light from the afternoon sun highlighted every detail of the room, from the intricate patterns of the rug to the glimmer of the silver picture frames that held memories long stored away. My parents sat quietly, exchanging glances, the words they had used for years echoing faintly in the space around us, but now softened by the weight of my composed presence. I allowed my gaze to linger on the small objects they had always overlooked, the delicate china cups, the carefully folded napkins, each one a testament to the care and attention I had given without recognition. The ticking of the grandfather clock was steady, rhythmic, matching the calm that I felt deep within, a steady pulse of patience and understanding that had grown over decades. I observed their gestures, the slight twitch of a hand, the hesitation in a movement, the subtle shift in their posture, each one revealing more than their words ever had. I moved toward the window and rested my hands lightly against the glass, watching the light dance across the lawn, noticing how the shadows of the maple tree stretched and bent in the soft breeze. Each leaf seemed to mark a moment in time, a quiet reminder of the hours I had devoted to learning, growing, and preparing myself for this very moment, moments that had been ignored, dismissed, and underestimated. I breathed slowly, deliberately, feeling the warmth of the sunlight and the faint scent of polished wood that had been familiar for years, grounding me in the present, reminding me of my own strength and resilience. I glanced back at the room, seeing the subtle changes in the expressions of my parents, the flicker of uncertainty, the hint of acknowledgment that had never been present before. I seated myself carefully in the armchair, maintaining a posture of composed observation, noting every shift in the atmosphere, every quiet exchange of glances, and understanding that the balance of perception had quietly begun to shift. The room, once a space of subtle condescension, now carried the weight of realization, the unspoken recognition that my presence, my decisions, and my achievements had always mattered, even if they had failed to see it. I let a small, controlled smile cross my face, not for triumph, but for the quiet satisfaction of being fully aware, fully capable, and fully recognized in the silence of observation, knowing that what had been underestimated for so long was finally being seen, and that the next moments would reveal the true depth of understanding that I had cultivated over the years. I stood in the center of the living room, the sunlight shifting gently through the windows, illuminating the subtle dust in the air and casting soft patterns across the floor. The quiet tick of the grandfather clock filled the room, each second marking a deliberate pause in the unfolding of this silent confrontation. I observed the way my parents moved, each gesture careful yet revealing, the slight hesitation in their steps, the unspoken acknowledgment of the awareness they could no longer dismiss. I traced the edge of the coffee table with my fingertips, feeling the smoothness of polished wood and the weight of the envelope resting atop it, a quiet symbol of what had long been hidden from their view. My gaze lingered on the photographs on the mantel, capturing moments of laughter, vacations, and milestones, and I felt the resonance of years spent unnoticed, yet unbroken, within me. I moved slowly toward the window, pressing my hands against the cool glass, watching the light play across the lawn and the shadows of the maple tree stretching and bending with the gentle wind. I reflected on the countless mornings spent preparing, learning, growing, each act a small assertion of autonomy and quiet resilience that they had failed to recognize. The room was thick with anticipation, attention held not in words but in presence, in observation, in the subtle shift of dynamics that had begun without declaration. My posture remained poised, deliberate, radiating calm confidence, and in the stillness, I noted the small changes, the tightening of a jaw, a flicker of recognition in the eyes, a pause before a habitual gesture. Every detail spoke volumes, the silence now a carrier of meaning far greater than any verbal assertion. I allowed my attention to wander across the familiar furniture, each piece a testament to years of careful maintenance, of dedication unseen, and in that observation, I found strength, a quiet assertion of worth. The air carried the faint aroma of tea and polished wood, grounding me in the sensory reality of the moment, while the world outside continued in its gentle rhythm, oblivious to the subtle power shifts occurring within this room. I leaned back slightly, hands folded neatly in my lap, eyes sweeping over each detail, noting the unspoken acknowledgments, the subtle recalibration of perception that had been set into motion. There was no rush, no need for confrontation. The understanding had begun, slow and inexorable, that the patience, intelligence, and deliberate restraint I had cultivated over the years had not gone unnoticed, and that the influence I had quietly amassed now spoke louder than any words ever could. I exhaled softly, a controlled breath, feeling the depth of presence and the weight of realization settling in the space, knowing that the unfolding moments would reveal the full scope of what had been quietly achieved, leaving no doubt of the respect and recognition long denied. I moved closer to the envelope on the coffee table, my hands resting lightly on the smooth surface, feeling the subtle weight and the potential it carried. The afternoon light caught the edges of the paper, glinting faintly, highlighting the significance of what lay before my parents, a silent testament to years of unnoticed diligence. I observed them carefully, noting the subtle shifts in posture, the faint tightening of shoulders, the quickened blinking that betrayed the recognition of the change in dynamics. I allowed myself a controlled smile, a quiet satisfaction that required no words, only the calm assertion of presence and awareness. The room seemed to hold its breath with me, the ticking of the grandfather clock marking the slow, deliberate passage of seconds as I surveyed the familiar furnishings, the photos, the carefully arranged decorations that had always been under my care. Each detail, from the polished surface of the side table to the delicate folds of the napkins, spoke of dedication and care that had gone unseen, unappreciated, yet now carried a newfound weight of authority and recognition. I walked slowly to the window and pressed my hands lightly against the cool glass, gazing at the well-manicured lawn, the gentle sway of the maple branches in the wind, and I felt the quiet power of patience and preparation manifesting in real time. My parents exchanged glances, their silence thick, each movement revealing more than words could convey, a subtle acknowledgment of competence long denied. I sat back in the armchair, maintaining a composed posture, eyes sweeping the room, noting the shifts, the unspoken awareness settling over the space. Every gesture, every glance, every small movement carried the weight of realization that the years of quiet effort, intelligence, and strategic observation had culminated in this unspoken turning point. The air was charged with subtle tension, a mix of surprise and acknowledgment, yet balanced by the calm that I exuded, the confidence that needed no declaration. I allowed the silence to stretch, letting them confront the reality of their misjudgments, the recognition of what had always been present but never validated. Each tick of the clock, each faint sound in the room, resonated with the quiet gravity of authority and self-assuredness that I carried effortlessly, demonstrating that patience, presence, and understated determination could speak louder than any argument, any protest, or any attempt to diminish value. I exhaled slowly, controlled, letting the moment settle, understanding that the balance had shifted irrevocably and that the next moments would reveal the full weight of recognition and respect that had long been withheld. I stood and slowly walked around the room, my eyes scanning every corner, taking in the way the sunlight shifted across the polished floors and the subtle shimmer on the silver frames that lined the mantel. Each photograph told a story of moments shared, laughter captured, and milestones reached, yet each had once felt incomplete, marked by the quiet dismissals and underestimations of my parents. I allowed myself to pause by the window, resting my hands lightly on the cool glass, feeling the warmth of the sun on my skin and letting my gaze drift to the well-kept lawn and the maple tree whose branches swayed gently in the breeze. The room seemed to hold its breath with me, every sound amplified, the faint ticking of the grandfather clock, the soft rustle of leaves outside, even the subtle shuffle of my parents in their chairs, carrying meaning that words could never fully express. I returned to the armchair, settling in with calm authority, and observed the small gestures, the hesitant movements, the glances exchanged, understanding that the room itself had shifted in energy. I reflected on the years of preparation, study, and quiet persistence that had brought me here, the accumulation of moments where patience and observation had built a foundation of competence they could no longer deny. My hands rested in my lap, fingers lightly intertwined, posture poised, conveying confidence and calm without a word. I could see in my parents' eyes the flicker of realization, the subtle acknowledgment of a truth they had overlooked for decades. The envelope on the coffee table remained a silent marker of this shift, its presence commanding attention without any need for explanation. I allowed the space to settle, each tick of the clock a reminder of the steady passage of time, each sound a rhythm echoing the quiet strength I carried. I thought of the countless hours spent perfecting small acts of care, attention to detail, and thoughtful preparation, each one unnoticed, but now magnified by their recognition. The tension in the room was palpable, but balanced by the calm I maintained, the authority of presence without confrontation, letting observation and awareness speak louder than words ever could. I allowed my eyes to drift across the familiar furnishings, noting the subtle changes in the light, the shadows shifting gently, the small movements that revealed acknowledgment, understanding, and a newfound respect. I breathed slowly, deliberately, letting the calmness settle deep within me, knowing that this moment marked a quiet yet powerful turning point, a subtle but undeniable assertion of the value, intelligence, and dedication that had always been present but never fully seen until now. Leaving my parents to contemplate what had quietly always been true. I stood by the window, letting the soft glow of the late afternoon sun fill the room, casting long, gentle shadows across the floor and illuminating the subtle details of the furnishings I had cared for over the years. The envelope remained on the coffee table, its presence a quiet assertion of the careful preparation, patience, and understanding that had guided every decision I had made, every path I had walked alone, but with intention. I observed my parents as they shifted subtly in their chairs, their expressions unreadable yet betraying the faintest hints of realization and acknowledgment, the recognition of competence and insight they had long failed to value. I allowed my gaze to wander across the photographs, noticing the moments of joy, of quiet accomplishments, the small triumphs captured in still frames that had previously gone unnoticed. Each memory carried weight now, layered with the silent validation that presence, attention, and persistence could command. The ticking of the grandfather clock marked the passage of time with steady precision, each second emphasizing the quiet magnitude of the change in the room's energy. I moved to the armchair, seating myself deliberately, posture composed, hands resting lightly in my lap, observing how each gesture, each microexpression, carried meaning far beyond words. The air seemed to hold a charged stillness, a subtle acknowledgment of the shift in dynamics, the unspoken understanding that my perspective, judgment, and careful planning were not to be dismissed. I breathed slowly, deliberately, letting the calmness settle deep within me, grounding my presence while I reflected on the years of learning, observing, and quietly asserting my worth in ways that had not been immediately visible. Outside, the breeze rustled the leaves of the maple tree, a gentle reminder that life moved in cycles, that patience and perseverance ultimately revealed their fruits. I allowed a soft, controlled smile to play across my lips, not of triumph over them, but of satisfaction in the quiet power of knowledge, of deliberate preparation, of understanding one's own value. The subtle shift in the room, the recognition of what had always been true, created a still, potent tension that required no confrontation, no argument, only the calm assertion of presence and awareness. Every detail, from the sunlight glinting on the polished surfaces to the slight movements of my parents, spoke of the culmination of long-held diligence and quiet resilience. I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the accumulated years settle, the room vibrating subtly with unspoken understanding, knowing that the acknowledgment had begun, that the truths long ignored were now finally seen, and that the coming moments would carry the full recognition of the intelligence, patience, and quiet authority I had always embodied. I took a slow, deliberate step toward the window, letting the sunlight filter across the room and highlight the textures of the polished wood floors, the soft sheen of the furniture, and the glimmer of the framed photographs that lined the mantel. Each photo carried a memory of celebrations, quiet achievements, and moments of connection that had often gone unnoticed, now imbued with a new significance as the shift in perception became undeniable. I rested my hands lightly on the sill, feeling the smooth surface, letting my gaze drift to the well-kept garden outside, the maple tree gently swaying in the afternoon breeze, its shadows stretching across the lawn. Inside, the quiet movements of my parents were deliberate, yet betraying subtle signs of recognition, hesitation, and the dawning understanding that their assumptions about me had been flawed for decades. I allowed my eyes to travel over the room again, noting the details I had long maintained with care, the polished edges of the tables, the carefully arranged books, the delicate folds of the napkins, all reflecting years of unnoticed dedication and precision. I breathed in slowly, letting the calm, deliberate rhythm ground me. Each exhale reinforcing the quiet authority I carried simply by being fully present and aware. The clock ticked steadily in the background, each second echoing the weight of preparation, patience, and resilience that had culminated in this moment, unspoken yet undeniably felt by all present. I sank back into the armchair with composed poise, observing every subtle gesture, every glance, every small movement, understanding that the power of perception had shifted irrevocably in my favor. The room, once heavy with condescension and dismissiveness, now vibrated with the quiet acknowledgment of intelligence, competence, and self-assurance that could not be ignored. I allowed a soft, controlled smile to appear, not from triumph, but from the serene awareness of all that I had quietly achieved, the steady accumulation of knowledge, patience, and insight that had prepared me for this subtle yet profound revelation. The envelope on the coffee table remained a silent testament to the unseen work, the calculated patience, and the steadfast commitment that had always defined me, its presence alone altering the dynamics of the room. As the sunlight continued to shift, casting new patterns across the floor, I felt the still, powerful energy of acknowledgment and understanding settling over the space. A calm yet unmistakable affirmation that the balance of respect and recognition had finally, inevitably, shifted, leaving them to comprehend fully what had long been overlooked, quietly commanding the recognition and authority that I had earned through decades of steadfast persistence and quiet determination.